أهلا وسهلا بيكم في حلقة جديدة من عسل وطحينة. Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of عسل وطحينة. My name is Asal.
My name is Tahina today. So yeah, guys, welcome. Today we have Logine here with us. Logine here with us today. And we're going to have an episode where we discuss sex, shame, and guilt. Just a little disclaimer at the start. We're going to be talking about, obviously, sex and shame and guilt, but there's going to be mentions of experiences of sexual assault or just sexual assault in general. So it's something triggering for you that you know that you need to not listen to. We ask you kindly to maybe skip this episode. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. If you can introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me. I don't know really what to say.
It's okay.
So yeah, I'm me. I'm Egyptian.
I'm me.
And I'm a psychologist as well. And part of like sex and guilt and shame that we were talking about, like obviously I grew up in Egypt. I mean, it's not obvious, but like I grew up in Egypt. And I've experienced my fair share of it. But also I am a psychologist, and part of my master's thesis was, well, not part of it, the whole master's thesis was looking into sexual guilt and shame, and how it affects Egyptians of different backgrounds or sex or gender or religiosity or sexual orientation. So I feel like we hit it on the nose with this one.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
I experienced both in research and whatnot.
And it's kind of like how it came about. Lujane and Youssef were talking about her thesis, and it was around that topic, and we were really interested by it because obviously as people from the Swana region and Arabs in particular, we do have that connection to it, but it's so interesting to see somebody from the region do like a bigger research into it and who's willing to talk about it so openly. So thank you so much for being here.
And always is better when the research is done by someone from there rather than just a European white person from outside. Just like, oh, it looks like these people, blah, 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 blah. You know? And it's super like orientalizing, or it has a little bit of racism in it or something. So.
But also like they don't exactly understand like the tiniest moments or bits that actually influence you. So it's whether a comment or lack thereof, or like a look or a tiny something in some show that you saw, or some feeling, just general, like it's just very hard to get these nuanced things.
Yeah,
I agree, because it's like there are, and this is something we talked about before, probably mentioned it here, it's like we have connection to our European friends and all that, but there are conversations that you can only have with an Arab that will understand exactly those little things from a show, or comments that you would hear your aunties say or your uncles, and these affect you sometimes really deeply. So it's really good that it was done by you, not by a white girlie.
but also I don't want to give myself like the biggest credit in the world. So it's not like I'm the only person in the world who got this idea. It's more so that like I've been privileged enough to probably be able to do that, as opposed to this is the first time someone has thought of that.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
And also, if I may, just like one question before we delve into the research and stuff. Like usually I get some comments it's in academia usually that, oh, if you're doing a study from a group of people that you belong to or community, this not going to be objective because you need to look at it from a third lens, whatever. What do you think about that?
I think that's a load of bullshit.
Hallelujah.
But no, to me, to be very honest, I think it might be a little bit different with psychology, because a lot of the stuff that I was interpreting and the way that I was interpreting the data that I was dealing with was the interpretation from someone who was there. So someone who wasn't there might not have been able to get the nuances or get these to interpret it properly. Like I don't really want to get into it too deeply on how like qualitative research used to be done, and how a long time ago like a random like researcher would go somewhere in the world and assume that their points or their views or how they take notes is the objective way, and because it's so objective because they're not from there, when in fact a lot of the stuff that they say is incorrect. So I think especially with qualitative research, like I've done a mixed methods, I've done quantitative and qualitative, but like with qualitative elements, the most important person there is the researcher, because it's your interpretation. You cannot be objective with it. It is your interpretation based on your life and based on the research and based on your interaction with the people that you've interviewed that no one saw but you. So,
and wouldn't you say, like, or that's how I'd imagine it, at least, since you are Arab and you have that connection with them, the interview would go very differently than speaking to an English speaker, right? Because you don't have that language barrier, you don't have that big cultural barrier of, like, you understand how to approach the questions, so they're comfortable enough. Would you say that
I mean, it took me a really long time of preparing for the questions, and I'm very happy because I had, like, my thesis mentor, he's Lebanese, and so, like, he's Armenian Lebanese, so he's able to actually understand the language. So we've worked a lot together, figuring out certain questions. Am I going to ask it this way or that way? But I did actually conduct all the interviews in English. I did allow, because it would have been insane, like an insane process to do the translation and all of the, like, PhD level, so I wasn't. So I did conduct it in English, but people were told that they can say things in Arabic and I would translate it, but I preferred when it wasn't the case because it just made my job a little bit easier. Yeah. Just because I didn't want to have to translate and go through that process because it adds another process research-wise. I completely forgot what we were talking about.
I was just saying, like, if you felt that, or how I would imagine it is that the connection with the people and understanding how they think, so how to approach the questions, is easier for you because you're Arab and you're from the same background, if that makes sense. Because I've seen, even for me, and this is completely, like, going away from this conversation, I've worked with refugees, and the way I would approach asking them about their situation was different than people who didn't understand the culture and the political background, and they were more open to me, even if I was not speaking in Arabic, because I had a bigger understanding of their situation and their cultural background than other people do. So I would imagine it'd be similar maybe for you, but maybe you didn't even notice it.
No, I'm pretty sure. Of course it was. Like, I had a lot of people telling me, like, thank you so much for doing this. We really need to. Like, it's amazing that someone's doing that. Like, some people said, like, it felt like therapy or a conversation or whatever. But I had put so much effort in how I was going to speak to people and how I was going to frame it. And the informed consent, and the fact that they're going to be anonymous, and the fact that it's going to be recorded this way and that way, and the fact that every single interview I've done, I had my camera on unless someone's internet had something glitching. They could choose not to record. And if they did, and it was an agreement before the interview was even scheduled, and I'd have an informed consent here. So I think for me to reach the point of having all this information from everyone isn't just because of who I am, but I think it's because of all the work that I had put in to make sure that their stories are safe, they're valued, they're going to be deleted. I had emailed them once I deleted their recording because I no longer needed it. I had emailed them if they wanted to see the research once it was published. So I think it has a bit more to do as well with making sure that they feel that their stories are so valuable and so important to me. And so I think because of that, people were much more open as well to tell me so much more. And I think a lot of them didn't expect to say many things that they've said.
Yeah, it's amazing. So maybe we can start diving into the research and what it conducts. Like, of course, I don't want to speak in your name. So, like, we have it kind of sorted about the interviews and how you approached it. But if you want to, like, introduce us to the research and how it came about, feel welcome to.
How the research came about? I'm not really sure how it came about. I knew I always wanted to do something about Egyptians. Like, I wanted to do the same thing during undergrad, but they were like, just do something easier. But I knew I wanted to do that. I don't know how the topic came. I think we were thinking first year of university, one of our professors was like, start thinking of what you want to do for a topic. And I was like, what do I want to do? And then I've come to realize that sexual guilt and shame were a very big part of my life. But it was also a part of other people's life that I know, but it's also part of the experience because of whatever I've experienced in life, and the tabooness and the intensity of it, and the lack of knowledge, and a lot of stuff around shame and guilt and sex, or lack thereof, but like the idea of sex to start with. So I was like, I need to do something. Yeah. And so I think that's sort of how it came about in the research. I don't remember how the exact details, because to me it feels like I've always done that.
Yeah. Because it's very connected to your personal Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, like I just went through a little bit of the interview because the research is intense. It's long. I'm dyslexic, so can't go through it that much. But I saw how you like separated the interviews to 6 different sections of like sexual guilt, sexual shame, shame as a result of sexual assault, causes of sexual guilt, and causes of sexual pain, shame, and external influences. So there's a lot of the word guilt and then shame. And it's a very interesting thing I would want to understand, how did you approach the difference between the two words? And
do I need to pull out the proper information? Okay, no.
Because honestly, before I read it, I thought it's the same thing. Guilt and
it's very
shame.
interconnected, right?
Look, they're both like self-conscious emotions. Like both of them are in the same group of emotions, but they're very distinct in how you feel them. But I think also sometimes we use them interchangeably, where like guilty or shame, but they're different experiences. Like one thing might lead you to feel guilty but not shame, but it could also lead someone else to feel shame but you to feel guilt. And sort of like guilt, obviously it's a painful interpretation of behavior or thought or something that I've done as a person, and so I interpret it and I'm like, I did something bad, like I don't like that I did so and so, and I sort of keep it to the behavior or keep it to the thought.
Just the mic.
And keep it to the thought. And it's sort of, sometimes we often just want to, we're ready like to like undo this wrong that we've done or fix it. So that could be, let's say hypothetically, if I'm in a situation, I might feel the need to apologize, or I might just feel the need to confess and I hope everything is okay, or whatever that situation happens to be. This is just the concept of guilt in general. But I think, and I will explain the concept of shame in general, and then you can just put sexual to it. That's sort of pretty much what it is. Well, shame is very, very unpleasant. Like, it is a much worse feeling to feel than guilt, because it sort of arises in a sense of there's something being dishonorable or immodest or improper, or like it lacks a sense of good taste in how I've conducted myself or in my circumstances. And so it might lead me to be avoidant or have some avoidant behavior, or be defensive or angry. But it's also at the same time, like if we were to put it in very simple terms, when I feel guilty, I'm like, I did something that's not great. When I feel shame, I'm like, I am not great.
So shame is kind of like, it becomes the image of who you are in front of yourself.
Yeah, you sort of put it to your core.
You internalize it.
Yeah, you internalize it. It becomes like, I am garbage, I am this, I am that, as opposed to I'm not the best thing. Again, both feel bad.
Yeah.
But shame feels so much worse.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then put that on sexual and
Shame,
sexual guilt.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, like, going through it and looking at shame and guilt, and would you say that like shame is connected more to the external world and guilt more to the internal, or are they both connected to both?
Like if we were to put it in the simplest terms, yeah, I would say so. That's the case. Like like I fully internalize a shame. Like if, again, like I think part of the way that I was explaining it to the people that I was interviewing, and I'm like, think of guilt as like more external. You'll feel guilty about something, but shame is more internal. Of course, it's like much deeper, and there's so much more layers and facets to shame and guilt. But yeah, we could put it more of public and private.
Okay. And now kind of going into how you approached understanding sexual guilt, then sexual shame, and then we can go through the points in your research. How would you say, like, let's imagine we're talking to a person who doesn't understand our culture or our background. How are you trying to approach it in your research to explain sexual guilt and shame in our region and its connection?
I think it's essentially, it's like much like any other place, right? But then you add an element of something a bit more conservative, or more, not conservative per se, but maybe something more closer to traditional. There's religious influence, but there's also cultural influence that's interpreted as religious influence. But then there's also like there's also so many little things and so many little aspects, or how you behave properly or how you behave improperly. And you cannot say like there's a general rule about how things should go and shouldn't go. At least like if I were to give an example, like last year, a friend of mine came with me back to Egypt for a visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard for her to understand sometimes. And I'm like, hey, you can't do this. Like, no, you can't wear it this way. You can't wear it that way. Not because someone was going to say something, but I think it's because there are other layers to it. Like, there's a layer of, no, we cannot represent ourselves that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that might not have anything to do with sexual guilt and shame, right? Or shame and guilt in general. But it's like, no, the prestige, the representation, how it is. No, it's Aib. Again, like the Aib, going into Aib, which was a very interesting part of my research to define.
That
define.
is the point I
read
have
that
right there.
To define. That was very fun because I was on the phone with my dad and I'm like, okay, help me out with which dictionary. What does Aib mean? And how does, because in English books written by Arabs or someone who's of that background, they had often translated Aib to shame. Which I'm like, Aib isn't really shame, because sometimes, like, literally, like, a kid could be picking their nose and you'll be like, Aib, don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does this have to do with shame? And so,
like, improper.
Sort of. It's essentially like improper. And so, like, we went through with my dad, like, I went through different dictionaries and he helped me out with different ones. And he was like, this dictionary says this thing, and like, this means it's flawed. Because you could say, like, Aib is like, the dress has like Aib, and it has like a flaw because, like, the button is sewn wrong. And so it was like going through these different things, like, okay, but Aib in this context means this, but Aib in this context means this. But then how does it feel like it's shame if we translate it to English? And essentially the conclusion was, Aib leads you to feel shame in some circumstances. Because if I can tell you, Aib, you shouldn't wear this, you shouldn't wear that, now I feel shameful about what I'm wearing. Like, maybe it leads to other things and other aspects and other nuances in society that exist. Like, Aib, you can't dress like this. Aib, you can't say this. Aib, you can't do this. And you're like, oh my God, like, I feel shame about everything that I do. I must be a disgusting person.
And then there's a word that we also use a lot, which is haram. And that is also, like, some people will use haram as like, haram alik, like, don't do that. That's mean. But then there's haram. There's like it can have a really deep meaning for people who are religious, of like, haram is would you say haram is connected to shame?
I don't know, but I mean, haram literally means that it's prohibited, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in like a specific context, it's not for like everyone in the world, but like technically, if you look at it from like Islam, haram literally means forbidden, prohibited, whatever.
Sinful, would you say?
I'm not sure if it actually leads to sinful, but is it?
That's how I viewed it.
At least growing up, like, haram would always means if you do it, then it will be sinful.
Yeah, like if
in that context, but of course I'm not talking about like.
Obviously, we're not talking about it from that
everyday, like,
Yeah, but like if you were talking about religion, somebody would say, oh, like eating pork is haram, sinful. Like, so it's very, I think it's very interesting for me to now hear it being here and hearing it in like in a context that is often not related to religion, because somehow haram has become a word I hear a lot here by white people as well. And I'm just like,
who do you hang out with?
No, I love my friends.
No, but I
think,
you
know you are.
No, but I think it's a bit different, because I think if you led to haram, to being sin, I think that's like, it led to that. Yeah. It does not mean that. Similarly, how Aib does not mean shame. So I think sometimes our brains take shortcuts with a lot of things in general. Yeah. Or like they fill in the gaps, or they fill in this space. So I think haram literally just means prohibited, forbidden. Regardless of whether you end up saying that this forbidden or prohibited thing leads to it being sinful, that is another explanation to what has, you know what I mean? But also in the same context, I'd be like, oh, haram, like, poor thing. Yeah. But also you can use it in a different context, like, oh, like, why are you beating the dog? Like, haram, what are you doing? Yeah. It doesn't just, like, obviously it initiates, like, or leads to a reaction from this person, because haram is a big thing, at least in society or in our culture. So if I tell you, like, haram, why are you beating the dog? Again, like, on a simple thing, like, we're not talking from a sexual standpoint.
Not beat dogs.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. Or like, you're not feeding the dog, or you kick something or whatever it is. Then it sort of initiates like a response, like, you should not do that. It's not just that it's a sin, it's that you're going to be punished for it. Yeah. True. In this context. So it's you're going to be punished for the thing that you do. because it is bad. But it's not just bad on like a worldly level. It is bad from a divine level.
Yeah, it could be even something smaller. Like, for example, you're being ignorant with school and you're like, haram alaik, why you do this to yourself? Like, you know, like, why, like, you should, you know, like, why are you being ignorant? Yeah, it's different.
Which is a different context. But it's, I think sometimes when we use it, it's like, I don't know how to translate it, but like, it's more so like, وحش في حقك.
Yes.
Like you're doing something bad for your own sake.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like you're
hurting yourself.
You're hurting yourself in some way.
Yeah. So now going back to your research and looking at also, because for me, at least from a person who doesn't understand it from that like research point at all, but just as a woman who existed, as an Arabic woman who existed and understands the feeling of guilt and shame around sex, how would you say it was different between men and women in the research?
When I was interviewing people, like obviously the research showed that men exhibit more, or like women exhibit more sexual guilt and shame than men. Right? Yeah. It's like I forgot. No, but I think in men, like it was harder sometimes in interviews. One, like obviously I didn't get as many men, but that's a normal thing that comes with researchers generally.
Sorry, did you have the same questions for men and women?
Yeah, everyone got the same questions. Everyone got the same stuff. It's just the number of men and women were different. Not because I didn't try, I'll tell you that. It's just it happens to be part of research where there's a gender difference in who is more willing to participate. But anyway, so like what I was trying to say is it was very hard sometimes getting men to talk about emotions on some level, but also it's like no, I don't have an experience, like I don't have something. And I'm like, are you sure? It's like, and I tried to say it differently. I'm like, yeah, no, nothing rings a bell. Like there's no, not really. But then they give examples of different other things, and based on the research that I had looked in, it's like men tend to feel like feelings of guilt or feelings of shame. I don't remember. I think it was more shame in this context. It was more so regarding like performance or size or different other things that aren't the same that women experience. I think it's more so of like how they've acted or their body or whatever in a different way, as opposed to women. But also maybe they don't have the same societal pressures. But regardless, like whether it is like, I think you'll find it similarly in different places of the world. Like it's not just exclusive to Egypt or just our region in general.
Like we all know that growing up, at least for me in a Czech high school, if a guy has more sexual partners, they're the cool guy, and if a girl does, she's a slut. Always like. So like how was it with women and looking at what were the most common feelings? Maybe I don't know if you want to talk a bit about like what kind of questions were you giving, and just in general, not like specific, and if would you say, because you said women tend to have more guilt and shame around sex, why do you think is that?
Well, some people talk about like experiences when they were younger, or they were told you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that, don't behave this way. Or I think one person had told me about one time someone in their family saw them hugging a boy. They were like, how could you do that? How dare you? Like, what is this? Again, she was more of a slightly conservative, not family, but she was from a conservative neighborhood, sort of. And it was like, what do you think people are going to say? How's it going to be? And so on and so forth. And her explanation was, if that's what they think about a hug, what do you think it's going to be when I kiss someone or when I hook up with someone or something happens? So I think like that's also a very interesting thing to find out, because like if you think this little thing that I have done that is pretty harmless and it's in front of everyone is this bad and leads to such a huge reaction, what's gonna happen? Then what is that going to lead to? And I think that's how we tend to figure out how something's going to bring you shame, because you can figure out from patterns of previous behavior, and you're able to be like, okay, like this was small, but like this is much bigger. Clearly it is, because I know it is. And so this elicited this reaction from this person, or this shame or this overreaction, if I put it that way. Then what is that going to experience to lead to? That's sort of how our minds work. You sort of try to recognize a pattern, recognize a behavior, figure out, okay, if I did this, then it's going to lead this.
And at a like a very young age, right?
Yeah.
Where like, because like looking at it now, like talking personal thing, is like it makes so much sense that when you were a kid it was like, oh, like don't have a boyfriend when you're 10 because that's a big deal, that's hype, and then it like doubles. Yeah, sorry. Just
no, but that's exactly the point. Like that's the nuance that's so hard to, like, that's integral to the research and integral to the topic to figure out, because if this thing, which is, let's say it's step number 1, is considered to be, wow, that's impossible, you shouldn't be doing that. Clearly being like hooking up, kissing someone, being in a relationship, dating, going into sexual whatever, yeah, we could say it's 100 in this context. And so what reaction is it going to lead to if one leads to a reaction that's like 92?
And if I may just ask the question before, for example, when you interviewed some guy, they said no, I did not participate in anything. Did any person say, for example, how did they feel about it, even if they didn't have any sexual encounters?
I don't recall anyone who hasn't had some form of an encounter. That doesn't have to mean that they've had sex or lack thereof, but it was more so that there is some interaction. There is some interaction with, whether it's the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever, whomever they were into. But it's a completely different thing when you're talking about like the same sex kind of thing. I don't, like right now I can't think of anything, but I'm pretty sure like I can't tell you because I can't think of anything.
Yeah, it's okay. But it's just interesting, like if someone, for example, who, let's say, for example, uphold this to themselves and they believed in it and they did not do like any sexual encounters, anything, how do they feel about it, as in a shameful way or guiltful way within their life, or maybe even after when they do it the proper way, does it still affect them or something? So it's just like was an interesting question for me.
I think you'd look into it a slightly different. Like I've known of women who had taken like virginity as a very, very, very serious thing at different points, and they had known like it's such a serious thing, you should take it very seriously, and they've taken it seriously for quite some time. And then when they've decided that, you know what, fuck it, I'm done with this, because they were ready, because they felt comfortable, like it's in a safe environment in this context, they were like, we had vaginismus. Like they've had vaginismus, which is I don't know if I should explain like what it is, but like it's they were like, we experienced vaginismus, and it's not because they haven't like they like, it was just because virginity was taken like such a high level that it felt like it was such a big thing, and the body was like, no, we've been taught to reject
just
this.
If somebody doesn't know what vaginismus is, it's that the vagina tightens up a lot and it's really hard for somebody to have
penetrative sex. Or penetrative
Why do I
anything.
feel uncomfortable? I'm usually so comfortable.
That's just do I need to explain it?
Because like I'm not usually uncomfortable talking about it, but it's because we're talking about it in the Arabic context. It brings out that side of like it's when the vagina becomes diluted and then it's hard to have penetrative sex because the woman is stressed. Thank you.
The more you know. And so that was something that people haven't experienced, or like I think there's a lot more nuance, and I think every person's experience is a bit different, and this deserves like a much bigger round table talk and like knowing more, because it's such an interesting topic that we don't exactly speak about as much. Or it's not that it's taboo, it's just that you don't, unless, or like maybe you don't speak about it like sort of publicly, but like if you hang out with the girls, you're fine.
And like going back to your research and what you were just saying, that such a small experience like hugging somebody in the street and getting a extreme reaction out of your neighbor will trigger that feeling of shamefulness or guilt. Did you see in your research that people with more conservative or religious backgrounds tend to have more shame around sex, or not necessarily?
I mean, I don't exactly remember the research, but I think religion and shame is sort of like salt and pepper, no?
Yeah. Yeah. And would you want to go more into like the personal experiences of what brought you to look into this and to kind of, because you said it was very obvious for you to choose this research, right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I think I could get into it.
You good?
Yeah, I'm fine. Let me just.
How's up? Yeah, another just
Another trigger warning.
Trigger warning. If you feel uncomfortable with conversations about sex and sexual assault, please leave this live stream.
Or come back to it when
you're ready.
Place.
When you're ready.
So for now, goodbye or hello. But no. Okay. So I think, like, looking back at it now, I'm obviously, like, I'm much older from when everything had happened. What do I want to say? No, I'll tell you. No, I'll tell you. So I had experienced a decent amount of sexual assault or harassment or slut shaming or blackmailing or whatever that was in high school. Well, middle school, sort of. Like, I think 7th grade, so that's like from 14, 15, somewhere along these lines, until I almost graduated, like, high school. So it was a very interesting time in many ways, that I can never say that I hate it, I wish it never happened, whatever. Like, it did. Like, you can't do anything. But I think it had led me to understand so many things about so many emotions, about so many experiences, about psychology, about an understanding of sexual guilt and shame from, like, not the research, but, like, how it works and how it functions or how it feels, how it interacts with depression, how it interacts with society, technically speaking, not that I would want it or wish it on anyone, but I would say it has made me the person that I am today because of how I have dealt with it and because of how I grew as a person and how I've healed and I have discovered things and people and connections and so on and so forth. So to put it in, like, just simpler terms, like, you don't need to get, like, in full details, but there was one person at my school, he came from another school, who was very odd, weird. I didn't know how to interact with it. We didn't have, like, any form of education at the time. I think that was around maybe 2009 or 2000, like, so somewhere along these lines. So again, the world was a very different place to start with. You didn't have all this knowledge everywhere on the internet, all the conversations. Me Too hadn't happened, and none of these conversations were being had to start with. So that was my, like, teenage years during this time, which again, like, and there was also the time where BBM and Messenger and Facebook and social media was coming up on the rise.
Yeah, and Kick and
I don't know what that is.
I don't know either. Like,
Saudi Arabia stuff.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So then, to me, like, then the person, like, that I always went to school with, like, he was very touchy, weird. I didn't know how to react to it because we never had sex education, but we also didn't have conversations on consent. You didn't have it was common knowledge that you shouldn't touch. Like, I guess that it was common knowledge that you shouldn't touch people. I don't know what this guy was onto, but, like, it just felt very weird. It felt very uncomfortable at the time for me because I'm like, what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to do? And it literally just started because I was friends with his girlfriend at the time, and then we talked about when they broke up, and so it wasn't even a conversation about sex. It wasn't a conversation about anything, but it was something around the area. And so he felt comfortable enough to be like, I am actually going to blackmail you, and I will tell people that you are a slut and you are a whore and you are this and that and that. And I was 14, 15, so I believed it. Yeah. And, like, not that also I've ever been told that, like, reputation is the biggest thing by my parents, but I have come to realize from society that apparently reputation is very important for women, which I'm like, why? What does this even mean? No, but, like, people are going to speak and people are going to talk, and if you have a bad reputation, then it means X, Y, Z, whatever. So that was sort of that, and then it just continued to escalate to other things and more things and at different points and coming in front of my house and whatever it is, for years on end. But I also, and then it's ended because some guy that I was seeing at the time, he wasn't my boyfriend, but I told him, and then he was like, oh, I'm going to deal with it. And so he told the guy that I'm his girlfriend, which I wasn't. And so that's how it ended, because the guy's like, sorry, I didn't know you were his girlfriend, as long as you're his girlfriend.
And he was harassing you for years?
Yeah. Like, but also, like, he'd make me do stuff and sexual assault and so on. Like, it just escalated with more and more and for years, and he wouldn't stop, and I would, like, it was just a lot, and I didn't really tell anyone. But I found out later that people actually thought that him and I were just hooking up. Oh my God, have you seen them? He's a clown. No. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
I would never
Willingly,
which is true.
Yeah.
Which is true. But no, anyway, like my point is the reason why it ended or it stopped was because of another man. That he
was able to stop it.
He told him that I was his girlfriend. So the guy was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you were his girlfriend.
So
and what do you think about this, like this ownership thing? Like, oh, like, sorry. I'm like, did you feel it's like, oh, I'm crossing your boundary. Okay, I'm not going to do it.
But
like,
that's the only time he felt that he was crossing a boundary.
And it was not your boundary.
Feel it with yours, only with other men or other boys.
Yeah, because I'm nothing. Like, I could be crying and saying, no, I don't want this. And he'd be like, ha, 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 no. Like, or whatever it was. But once another man was involved, and I really don't know what this guy did. But all I know, like, I really don't know. Like, I remember calling him at the time. I think it was, I don't remember when, but I remember calling him one time. And I was like crying and I was telling him what was happening. And he was like, do you trust me? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And he was like, okay, I'm going to deal with this. And then a while back, a bit after, like, let's say half an hour, the guy messaged me. He's like, oh, all sorted. And then I get a message from the guy who's sexually assaulting, rapist, whatever it is. And then he goes, I have no idea you were his girlfriend. I am so sorry. As long as you were with him, I am going to clear your name. And I am blah, blah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Because of a man. And mind you, we were like 16.
Wow.
That's insane. Like
17?
This is, I'm going to say like the stupidest example, but like what it reminds me of on like the much lower level, it was like when you're at a bar and a guy asks you for your number.
I have a boyfriend.
And I'm like, if you say I have a girlfriend, they will not back off. But if you say you have a boyfriend, they'll have more respect for the guy who's not there with you than you who you are standing in front of him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's like very like a bad example of like
but like
you know,
yeah, obviously, but like then you also have other things in our region. We have like a bit of a fucked up thing where it was like the man's what is it, a man's something is measured by the women and their control, like his view, his image, or how it's like, or his reputation is with his women and how they behave and how they interact. They're like, oh, you're going to bring us shame, you're going to do this or that.
You mean like shut off? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and yeah, it's partly that, but I think also it doesn't always have to be like in this extreme version. Like you still have varying elements of society and different people who might not go into this very extreme view of like, I am defined by my women, but it's also whether they want it or not, society's going to see it that way. Yeah. Similarly, how I could have said all I wanted and I could have said no when I said fuck off, leave me alone, whatever it is, at different points for many years or whatever. But until another man got involved, it means nothing. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm so sorry. This is so horrible, but it's also like, I think it shows a pattern in our society, but also in the world in general, where women are viewed as this object, like to oversimplify it, an object to to be used and to make men feel good about themselves, whether it's how you, like we often talk about the male gaze, right? Like to going to like the most simple thing of like you subconsciously dress in a way to satisfy men's gaze because that's how society is formed. And I just want to ask you, like, after experiences such thing and then going to studying psychology and understanding it more, how would you say processing shame goes? Because like you said, shame is kind of more connected to who you are. And from what I've read from you, but in general, I feel like people with experiences of sexual assault can both feel shame and guilt, but it's often shame because it becomes who you are, right?
Yes, because it is something that happens to you and shakes you to your core. Because it changes your view of safety. Because intimacy becomes a completely different thing. And in intimacy, I don't even mean it in the context of with a partner or with a sexual whatever, or with a romantic partner, whatever. I think it's on a grander, like it's on an even simpler level. It is the fact that, like, let's say you and I were friends and we're hanging out. I would have a hard time if you were to like hug me or to touch me, because it is a violation to my body and to my space. It is PTSD involved, and PTSD includes shame. It is essentially, it shakes a person to their core. You don't feel as safe. A person becomes, you flinch. You look at things, there are flashbacks. There's all these things that come to it. And so obviously it's going to lead to me internalizing, which is shame is the emotion where I internalize an experience as opposed to I did this, I feel bad about it. It becomes, I am this. I am not worthy. I am not worthy of being loved. I'm not worthy of being cared for. I'm not worthy of my safety. I'm not worthy of whatever it is, because it has been violated because of whatever sexual assault or assault in general that has happened, because it is a breach on another person's. Because I think it's not just on a physical level, it is on a mental level as well. It is on the core of who you are as a person.
And your autonomy.
Autonomy, it just contaminates many things in many ways, or it just feels like it ruins you as a, like, not ruins you literally as a person, but like you can never go back to before that. Because for instance, someone can experience anxiety or depression, you can easily go before that. But with PTSD and anxiety and depression and the sexual assault, like, you cannot undo an experience and how it has affected you on your nervous system, or how has it affected your body, or how it affected your subconscious. So it's very, I don't know like how to explain, but it's just a very disgusting experience. And I think there is an element of disgust as well, because you're like, I am disgusted by myself and my body, and if I'm disgusted by myself and my body, I can easily feel shame. I can, there's a lot to it in general, the experience of sexual assault, but also sexual shame in general. Like, I have spoken to people when it came to the research, the person hadn't experienced anything, it was fine, but like whenever he was a bit more religious, I guess, or a bit more of a religious background, but whenever he felt like he would have a sexual interaction, he felt like he needed to shower right away because I need to get clean.
That's a thing I hear about from a lot of religious people. Like, even I heard this from like a friend. Her friend was already married. She's 25, married to a man, and every time they would have sex, they would both go shower in separate showers because they felt both this like extreme sense of guilt and shame around it.
But also, like, there is this idea of ghusl, you know, the idea of ghusl after committing any sexual acts. That also kind of conflates with it. Where
perhaps I don't understand.
If you want to pray or if you want to do wudu or something, you're gonna have to shower and wash your body and your home.
But I think when you take it to a more extreme level, and when you take it from an area of shame and whatever, like, fine, the shower after the clean, shower, it's fine. But I think there's a huge difference between the purpose I shower, like, it's been sweaty, it's been whatever, I need to clean up, or someone wants to go pray after, whatever they could do, like, it's fine. You're purifying it, like, from bodily fluids, like, it's not that it's dirty, but like, I think when you feel the need to do it, and I need to do it because otherwise I'm not clean, then that's a completely different experience.
Or doing it because you're just thinking about it or something.
Because it's like, we're not saying nobody should shower after sex. Up to you. Like, do whatever you want. Cuddle or shower, up to you. But it's like, to have this strong emotion of like, I need to because now I'm dirty and I need to clean myself. And but maybe just remembering from your research, but like, now not talking about your research in particular, but that sometimes there were interviews with people from the LGBTQ plus community, and that shame, like, I think there's even like and now talking outside of sexual assault, just about shame around and shame and guilt around sex. It's like in our region, but even everywhere, there's like even a like another level to shame and guilt around sexual interaction. So I was wondering how, because in general, like for all of us, like having conversations with Arabic people who are part of the community or queer, whatever they identify with, it's like, I feel like when you are talking about shame or guilt around sex, if you live in our region, is so much deeper than, for example, when you live outside our region, right? Because you have all these outside pressures of like, this is haram, this is shameful, but this is also sinful, right?
Yeah.
And
It's like an added layer.
And did you see it talking to people during your research, or even from generally
or outside,
starting
just your personal
yeah,
life.
like starting these conversations with people about their feelings around sex and shame from our region when they're queer? And did you find it difficult to make people open up?
No, I think they were pretty open. They were lovely. I think it was different. I think we just need to make. Oops. I think it's important to make a distinction as well with people who identify as men or people who identify as women, or like are cis men and cis women. It's very different, because generally speaking, women who are queer, it's not easier, but it is more acceptable on some level. Or it's more so like the girls have a girls' night. It's perfectly fine if they close the room and whatever, and they do whatever, and people don't really think about it too much or whatever. But when it comes to men, or something is happening, or even expressing more emotion, or however it is, that is huge. But also, if we were to look at it from laws and countries and stuff, it's generally men, or being a gay man is more punishable than a gay woman, or like a lesbian or something. Because it's just like, whatever, I guess. So obviously, each one poses even different shame or different guilt or different pressures on different sexes or genders in this context as well.
Like, I think it's very interesting because there are countries, without mentioning maybe names, in the Gulf that we know do have these open homosexual relations. Not open, but like we know it's part of their society because they're so segregated.
Like homoerotic?
Yeah. Like they're so segregated, like the genders are so segregated, and it's somehow normal, but it's still not like nobody admits to ever doing it.
Or at least, like, from what I saw growing up in one of these countries, it happened all the time. Like, homosexual acts, putting it between quotes, happen all the time, but just people did not identify as one, and they would often see it as a phase, or just like getting their needs out, or some people just see it as actual like form of love between a person and another. But it would happen all the time, and it was so much easier because like it was segregated, like women alone, men alone. So I've seen the most growing up there than anywhere in any LGBTQ friendly country all around the world or whatever. It happened there the most. And yeah, I think what was different is just identifying as being queer or gay, just different. They don't identify with that, at least most of them. Now it's different. I'm just speaking from what I saw like 6 years ago. Now it's completely different climate. But just talking from that point of view,
it's so interesting because the Gulf is, not all of it, but parts of it are more gender segregated, and it's more common. And for example, for me at least, growing up in Syria is not as much gender segregated, so it's less normalized, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so too. Because we're pretty like mixed normal. Like I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But the segregated would be like in trams or something. But I don't take the tram, so I don't know. Or like in certain areas or in certain environments, but it's less so segregated, more so people choose to have their own spaces.
Yeah, I just like going back to guilt and shame around sex as a woman. I would say, at least for me, growing up in Syria until I was 11, and then I came to the Czech Republic, and I am not from a very conservative background or religious background, but I am from a Muslim family. And like looking back at it, one of the things that were holy and must be protected is virginity, right? And in our region, virginity for women, because we have the hymen, thank you very much, is like, that is all there is to be protected. And for me, at least growing up, I had so much pressure. I put so much pressure on myself of like, oh, like what happens if it breaks, and I'm gonna not have, like, I'm gonna be in so much trouble, and I'm never gonna get married, and I'm never gonna have a
or even not doing sports that could break it, like
that's the
Horseback riding.
horseback
Yes.
riding.
Yes.
Like, how are we going to do the return if the seal is broken?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you grew up with that sense of like, this is to be protected, and then if you move on throughout your life and you decide, oh yeah, I want to not wait until marriage or not, that feeling still stays even if you decide to be sexually active outside of marriage, I guess. And it's so interesting to talk to people from our region of like learning to decode and unlearn shame around sex through also educating yourself, because we talked about it before. If you grew up in the Middle East and Arabic countries and Muslim countries in general, you don't have sex ed. And I'm a person who I came to the Czech Republic during the time where you're supposed to get sex ed, like to the 7th grade, and I missed it. So I never got sex ed in school, so I had to like educate myself on my own and have like very open conversations and stuff. But it's like very interesting to look at it of like talking to people from the Middle East of trying to Swana who are trying to like decode that shame around it. Do you guys, not, it doesn't have to be from your own experiences, but experiences from people around you who you know who have similar backgrounds of like, do you think we are able of decoding it and having that positive relationship to sex fully, or do you think it'll always stay there? Do you think we will ever heal?
No. And I think it's always going to be something that exists everywhere in the world. I don't think sex ed is the end all be all, because also it depends on what kind of sex ed they do.
Yeah, because
like,
it
there's
could
no
be
queer
fear-mongering sex ed that, you know.
It could be like, this is how you do this, don't do that, but it's not going to be a conversation on consent.
Yeah.
Or
queer sex. Like I feel like there's not enough conversation about queer sex. Maybe there is about gay sex, but not about femme.
Yeah.
In schools, I mean.
Yeah. But like, I think it's not just, I mean, back, like at least in the Swana region, you'll find like so many Instagram accounts and different things, either things in Arabic or in English, and different accounts that have popped up over the years, like more recently, about sex ed and about whether you want ones about queerness and the experience and how it is like and so on. But it's also to educate, in this context, women a lot of the times on how to manage things or how to do things, and things about birth control and things about protection and things about, if you're talking about, let's say like queer, you could talk about things about AIDS, and you can talk about things that PrEP exists, and in different countries they're readily available through insurance and through different things and protection. And so all of this comes with it. But it's not just that. If people are going to have whatever protection it is, like, I don't know, condoms or like what's the dental dam or whatever these are, that's not the end all be all of sex ed or protection. Or as simple, if you're talking about like in heteronormative stuff, it's like, like just make sure you ask her. Like, it's not just about that. There's also aftercare. There's also the fact that you need to care about this person. There's also, you don't really want to be using the person in some way or another. You need to be like, if you're intoxicated, it's this and that. Are you really going to speak about any of these conversations at school?
Mm-hmm.
That's true. It's like bringing conversation exactly about this person might be drunk or high. Does that take away from them saying yes? Is the yes still
valid?
Valid.
Is it like, but it like, how do we manage that? And like, how do we do it? Do we talk with friends groups?
My friends show me this.
The
tea. Just look up British sex ed tea video, and it's explaining how if you offer somebody tea and they say yes, and then you bring it to them and they say no, you don't force them to drink it. It was actually triggering watching it. Honestly, I was triggered.
And if someone is sleeping, you don't pour the tea in their mouth.
And like there's like visuals of like somebody pouring tea in somebody's mouth, and I was like, I'm triggered.
But you know, like on a very simple scale, like at some point, maybe like 6 years ago, I used to teach at preschool. Okay. And it was mostly just white kids. And the reason why I'm bringing it to context, because it makes sense in this context.
Just used to teach white kids. I just wanted to share. That's all.
Sure. So I teach at preschool. I have curly hair, and so a lot of the kids find it very interesting to touch. They're 4 or 5, so it's kids. So then I was like, you know what? I'm teaching these kids consent. Because it's a general concept in life. It's not just about, like, it's just a general thing. I also don't like it when people touch my hair in general. If you're not my friend, if you're not this, you're like,
and ask even before, like, can I touch your hand?
It's so weird. I'm like, your hands are dirty, get away. But no, anyway, back to the kids. So then I remember they were these twins. Generally, they're the ones who wanted to touch my hair. So then I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, sometimes I'd be like, you need to ask before we touch it, because it's my hair, and maybe I don't want you to touch it. Maybe it's this and that. So then sometimes I'd be like, can I touch your hair? Sometimes I say yes. Sometimes I say no, because I think it's very important to also be like, a question doesn't mean the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But I think I've had to do it at another point with other kids in the preschool, not about my hair, but about like, like, this is my manjal, like my husband. Yeah. This is this and that or whatever. And it was like, but he says he doesn't want to.
So like the kids saying that he's my husband, yeah.
And so like the kids telling one another, like, he is my husband, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but like he says that he doesn't want that. So how about we find someone who wants that? But I think, but
find a husband that wants you.
but you know what I mean? Like, it's such a simple level. It's also like, if you talk about like sex ed needs to be in there, does it need to just be that kind of sex ed, or does it need to be that the whole system of education and whatever we do, when the way you raise kids at home and however it is in society and culture, emphasizes on a person's autonomy? Because if I know how important it is to ask before I do something, and mind you, if not just me knowing it, it's like, you know that it is important to ask before you touch someone else, and that your body, someone has to ask before they touch it, in any context, like not even in a sexual context. Yeah, it's going to translate to, one, recognizing when someone touches you and you're like, no, you shouldn't have touched me. Because I think a lot of the times, from speaking to different friends and from experiencing it myself, I never really know what to say. Like, he touched me inappropriately or weirdly, and I'm like, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, what do I say? What do I do? And then it leads to shame. Like, I should have said something. I should have done something. Like, what is wrong with me? Like, what am I, an idiot? Like, I can't even speak to myself because of the situation.
There's this huge, like, guilt around not reacting right or not reacting at the right time, right? Of like, oh, I just got touched inappropriately. I realized it 5 minutes later, or like, I didn't know what to do. I froze in the moment. And I think it's what you're saying is so important. Of like, if kids at a really young age are taught to say no, and if they say no and the person still is touching, even if it's like touching your hand, being like, don't do that, my hand, then you will learn as a child and then become a young adult who's starting to have some kind of sexual interactions with people of like, no. And I'm not saying that will stop sexual assault. Sexual assaults is a power dynamic. The person, it's not their fault, obviously, but it can teach society, even the little boys, of like, no, like, the girl will say no and she will scream in your face and she will make a big scene, so don't dare try to push those boundaries.
But it's also girl on girl and boy on
boy, whatever, of course,
like, it's for everyone as well.
Sorry.
So
I'll get in trouble.
But I think it tends to happen that way. But yeah.
And
I think it's lacking everywhere. It's not just like a certain region or something. Just to talk about body autonomy, saying no, saying yes, asking before. It just should be taught everywhere, even if there is like sex ed. It usually doesn't teach these things.
That's such a good point. Of like,
but like, do you know what was really hard for me, apart from many other things, like going through sexual assault experience and how it was like? It was later on, like, being able to be comfortable with my body. Like, it took me, like, be comfortable in my body, or like figure out where it feels this or how it feels that, or like, to me, years later, like, yoga had helped me a lot, because with meditation, and I'm not like trying to promote it, but I'm just saying, like, in with yoga or meditation, because a lot of the fact of the exercise or the workout that you do is sitting with your body, is recognizing things or feeling how it would be, but it's also different stretches or like pigeon pose or many things. And our body stores a lot of, maybe I can have understood the trauma in my mind and in my heart and how it felt and how it was, but my body doesn't fully forget it. Yeah. Or how the experience
there forever.
It stores it. No, maybe not forever, but like, it's stored until you find a way to let go of it, I think. And so to me, like with many of the things in yoga, it got me to get back the autonomy to my body, because it's mine. Like it is mine, it is my autonomy. Like I feel it, I know how it feels, I know how this part feels, or this other, the shoulder, the arm, the everything. And by putting myself on and on, because I used to do yoga like a couple of times a week for like 2 years on end, because the yoga studio is right next to my house. And used to do meditation and so on, and with a lot of journaling and figuring out how it feels in my body. And so gaining a lot of the autonomy by myself, for myself. And it's not just in like therapy, because yes, I've done therapy and everything, and it was nice to speak about it, but it was also important to feel my body and what it is, and how it feels and how it's like, and gain that power that, for lack of a better word, was taken from me.
Yeah, so you're saying it's not only important just about speaking about it, but also like feeling your emotions going through it and reclaiming your autonomy over time?
Obviously, yes, but I think it's also not just feelings. It is, I need to like my body, like I need my body to feel that it is safe, and I make it feel safe. Apart from me being in safe environments and having safe friends and so on, but it is, can I speak to my body and tell my body that has experienced the fight or flight that, hey, like it's no longer exists? You can't really go to your lizard brain and tell the lizard brain like, hey babes, what is happening? Like we're good. So I think
I love how you put it. We can't tell the lizard brain.
But really it is the lizard brain. Like so you have to reach a point where, how do I tell you something? I need to show you. I need to experience it. I need to be in the moment, and I need to be with my body, and I need to feel what my left ear is feeling right now. Right? Like, how does it sound? Or like, what my toes are like, and what are my fingertips, and so on, and feel parts of my body and how it's like in different stretches. And to me, that's how I gain my autonomy in many ways.
It's amazing. Like just jumping from that to, like I said, we grew up, not just we, like in general, everybody, every woman, every person, but from our background specifically is a lot of shame and guilt around sex. And for example, what I do to not feel those emotions around my body is kind of exactly give myself space, but also accept who I am, accept my body, and try to let go of like what other people think. Practice self-love, where, for example, for me, it's standing in front of the mirror for fully naked for a long time and just being like, that's okay, that's my body. It's not scary. It's not like, you know. So do you guys have any, like you said, for example, yoga and stuff, is there any small practices or any tips other that you would want to add into this conversation of like, this makes me feel good? It doesn't have to be even about like sexuality. It's just simply like accepting your body as it is, because we also have this thing with like, we grew up, we look not super okay, I know I look quite white, but like we look a little bit different than people around us here. So like learning to love your hair, learning to love yourself. Is there any kind of thing you would want to add to that conversation?
For me, for example, I struggle a lot coming here because I would always straighten my hair, because I'm like, I don't look like the Tumblr boys. All their hair is wavy or straight, and no one looks like me.
Youssef the Tumblr boy.
But then later, I had a friend who also had curly hair, and she just taught me how to take care of it and kept telling me that it's looking good and great, and just like ever since. And it was also during a period of my time where I was just slowly like accepting who I am and just like loving all the parts of me, no matter how I wouldn't say defective, but just like how normal it is or unnormal it was, and just accepting all of it. Journaling helped a lot, sitting down, just processing lots of like where does this shame come from, where does this guilt come from, trying to recall encounters in my childhood that maybe shaped me in that way or made me look that way, or maybe nowadays, and just like sit with that. And for me at least, that helped a lot. And just having like a supportive people around you, I would say that helps a lot.
I think definitely having amazing people around you, and that's very important. I think to me, one thing that I do and I really like, and I feel like it is such a moment of like pure like love to myself is when I'm out of the shower or not, and I put lotion on my body. And I do it like very, very intentionally. Like I know that I'm doing it like on my arm or on my shoulder, and I love that part of me, and I love this, and I'm doing this because I love my body so much and myself so much. So I am moisturizing because I don't want to be ashy, but like it's not that bad. Like, but I'm moisturizing because that's how you take care of your skin, and your skin is the biggest organ on your body. So that's what I'm doing, or like doing things very intentionally. But it's also taking a moment to like slow down. As for instance, for me, like when I'm massaging my scalp at night for my hair, like I'm using like rosemary water because I want my hair to be this, or it's basically taking the things that society might have told you that this is blah blah blah, whatever nonsense someone has said at some point, and being like, it's not a fuck you to that person generally.
A little bit.
But I think it's more so you're not doing it angrily. It's not done from a place of fuck this person, I'm doing it because out of spite.
Yeah.
But it's more so like, I know that you think it's awful, and that's sad for you to experience that in life, because life is, there's so many beautiful things. And so I'm going to choose to show myself love in these areas that have been deemed otherwise by this person or whoever, nobody. And so that's the strength that comes with it, that I'm like, this is my way of showing love, and it is purely because I love myself, not because of whomever said this or to spite whomever.
Yeah, and I think it's really important not doing in spite, because I think, or at least in my experience, whenever I tried doing that, it was just like you're doing the opposite thing to yourself.
Bringing, like, negative emotions.
I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're just doing the negative thing, and
You're rebelling.
Exactly.
And the energy of rebellion, it's great in some areas, but when you want to experience love and give yourself the form of love that you want, you don't want to do it out of rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. Like not doing it in spite, but doing it because you want to, and just like being okay, or being like, as long as I'm happy with myself, then like I don't care how other people view me, and that slowly like built my confidence, and just like doing whatever I want as long as I think it's like good for me, or as long as I love it for myself. So that also helped, not doing it in spite, but just actually because I want to do that. So yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you, guys. I don't think I have anything to add. Is there anything you want to add?
Any last remarks? Any books you're publishing? Any research? Any shout outs?
I wish.
Someday. Wait for her book. It's gonna come someday.
You'll be the first to know. No, I think it was very nice speaking to you guys.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank
for
you so
you
much
guys
for
who are
coming.
here.
Yeah,
Love
like
you.
subscribe to my YouTube.
It's called subscribe. For me, it's subscribed.
Okay.
Subscribe.
Okay.
So it comes from crying.
Okay. Thank you. No, but really, thank you so much for being here with us and being so honest and open.
You're welcome.
And like
thank you for having me.
having a conversation that can be difficult for some people or viewed as taboo. And even your research, it's amazing for, even you said people you were interviewing where like this is needed. And I do believe that these conversations for our communities are so important for us to stop, at least for the generations to come after us, to be more educated about it, about consent, about sex ed, and to have space where this is not taboo anymore.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Please.
Or maybe not just generations to come, just people around us. And
Yeah.
And we really value your time, and thank you for spending your time with us.
Thank you for having me.
We love her.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. So yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.